The rain had started the moment Catherine stepped out of the Pemberton estate, as if the heavens themselves mourned what had just happened inside that elegant drawing room. She walked, not ran, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. Not stumbled, though her legs felt like water beneath the sodden silk of her evening gown. Just walked, one foot in front of the other, her head high despite the rain plastering her dark hair to her face, despite the curious stares of passers-by sheltering under shop awnings, despite the fact that her entire world had just shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Behind her, in Lady Pemberton's drawing room, her former fiancé Edmund Hartley stood explaining to their assembled families and friends why the wedding scheduled for next month would not be taking place. Why Catherine Winters, daughter of the late Viscount Ashworth, was no longer suitable to be his wife. The words still echoed in her mind, each one a fresh wound. "I'm afraid Miss Winters has proven herself unsuitable for the position of my wife. Her behavior this past month has demonstrated a shocking lack of propriety and judgment. I cannot, in good conscience, bind myself to a woman who so thoroughly disregards the standards expected of her station." Catherine had sat there, frozen, as Edmund recited his rehearsed speech, had watched the shock ripple through their guests, had felt her mother's hand tighten on her arm with desperate pressure, had seen the triumph in Miss Abigail Peterson's eyes as she stood beside Edmund, playing the concerned friend, while clearly relishing Catherine's public humiliation. And she had known, with absolute certainty, what was happening. Edmund had found someone better, someone with a larger dowry, better connections, more influential family, and rather than simply ending their engagement privately, he had chosen to destroy her reputation publicly, to paint her as unworthy, to ensure that no one would question his decision or sympathize with her. She had been disposed of, discarded, declared defective, and returned like faulty merchandise. The rain came harder now, soaking through her cloak, her dress, everything. Catherine welcomed it. Let it hide the tears she refused to shed in front of anyone. Let it wash away the memory of Edmund's cold eyes as he pronounced her unworthy. Let it blur the world until all she could see was the cobblestones beneath her feet and the endless gray of the London evening. She had no destination in mind. Her mother had remained at the Pemberton estate, too shocked to follow, too concerned with salvaging what remained of their social standing. Her brother was in Scotland on business. Her friends, those who remained after tonight's spectacle, would be too embarrassed to acknowledge her for weeks at least. Catherine was alone, completely, utterly alone. A carriage rattled past, splashing water that soaked her already drenched skirts. She didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge it, just kept walking through the rain-soaked streets of Mayfair, a ghost in wet silk, going nowhere and everywhere at once. She had loved Edmund once, or thought she had. Now, walking through the rain with her reputation in ruins and her future uncertain, she realized she had loved the idea of him, the security he represented, the respectable, comfortable life they would have built together. But Edmund himself, the man who could destroy her so casually, so thoroughly, simply because someone better had come along, that man she had never really known at all. Behind her, though she couldn't hear it over the rain, wheels rattled against cobblestones. A carriage, moving faster than was safe on the wet streets. Not just any carriage, but one that bore the crest of the Duke of Thornfield, golden and unmistakable even in the evening gloom. Inside that carriage, Alexander Thornton, 8th Duke of Thornfield, sat forward with an urgency that surprised even himself. "Faster," he told his driver. "Your Grace, the streets." "I don't care about the streets. Faster." He'd been at his club when word reached him. A broken engagement. Edmund Hartley, that pompous fool, had publicly humiliated Catherine Winters at Lady Pemberton's engagement celebration, had declared her unsuitable in front of half of London society, had left her there while he paraded his new interest on his arm. Alexander had known Catherine Winters since she was 18 and he was 25, had watched her grow from a shy debutante into a woman of grace and intelligence, had attended her engagement party to Edmund Hartley 3 months ago, and had left early, unable to watch her promise herself to a man so clearly beneath her. But he'd had no right to interfere, no claim to make. He was the Duke of Thornfield, and she was the daughter of a late Viscount with a modest fortune and no particular connections. Their worlds intersected socially, but that was all. He had told himself that Edmund would make her happy, that his own feelings were irrelevant, that watching her marry someone else was simply the price of his own cowardice in never speaking. Now Edmund had thrown her away like rubbish, and Alexander's carefully maintained distance didn't matter anymore. "There," he said, spotting a figure in the rain. Small, bedraggled, walking with the determined stride of someone who refused to break even as they shattered. "Stop the carriage." Catherine heard the carriage stop beside her but didn't pause, didn't look. She had no interest in whoever wanted to gawk at the fallen woman, the discarded fiancé, the cautionary tale. "Miss Winters." That voice made her pause. Deep, familiar, edged with something that sounded almost like anger. She turned slowly, rain dripping from her eyelashes, and looked up at the Duke of Thornfield leaning out of his carriage window. Alexander Thornton. She'd known him for years, of course. Everyone knew the Duke of Thornfield. Wealthy, influential, handsome in a way that made debutantes stammer and society matrons scheme. He'd always been kind to her at balls and dinners, had danced with her occasionally, had once told her she had a remarkable mind when she'd argued with Lord Pemberton about education reform. But they weren't friends. They were barely acquaintances outside of formal social settings. What was he doing here? "Your Grace," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I'm afraid I'm not fit for company at present. Get in the carriage." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with ducal authority and something else, something that sounded like concern. "I thank you for your kindness, but Catherine," her name, not her title, intimate and unexpected. "Get in the carriage. You're soaked through, it's getting dark, and you're walking alone through London in an evening gown. Get in the carriage, please." That "please," added at the end, broke something in her. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, but his gentleness, his concern, made her walls crack. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted quietly. "I can't go home yet. I can't face my mother. I can't—" Her voice broke. "I just need to walk. Then we'll drive," Alexander said. "Aimlessly, if you prefer. But you're not walking through London alone in the rain. Not tonight. Not like this. Before we continue, dear listener, tell me, where are you listening to us right now? From the kitchen while preparing lunch? From the living room, taking a well-deserved break? Or perhaps from the bedroom, relaxing after a long day? Leave it in the comments. We love knowing you're here with us. And if you're enjoying this story, if the romance is touching your heart, please tap the like button right below. It helps us so much to continue bringing beautiful stories like this to you. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. We have a new exciting story every week waiting for you. Now, let's return to our story, because you will not believe what happens next. Catherine stared up at him, this Duke in his fine carriage, offering her refuge when she'd just been declared unworthy by a man of far less consequence. It made no sense. He had no obligation to her, no reason to involve himself in what would certainly become the scandal of the season. "Why?" she asked simply. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, rain falling between them, the London evening darkening around them. "Because Edmund Hartley is a fool," he said quietly, "and because you deserve better than walking alone in the rain. She shouldn't get in, should preserve what little remained of her reputation, should think of propriety and protocol and all the rules that governed their world. But she was already ruined. Edmund had seen to that. What did one more scandal matter? Catherine climbed into the carriage. The interior was warm and dry, upholstered in deep burgundy leather that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Alexander sat across from her, and she was suddenly acutely aware of how she must look. Soaked, bedraggled, her carefully arranged hair hanging in wet ropes around her face, her dress clinging uncomfortably, water pooling beneath her on his expensive carriage floor. "I'm ruining your upholstery," she said, because she had to say something, and that seemed safer than addressing any of the truly important questions hanging between them. "It's leather. It will survive." He rapped on the roof. "Drive. Anywhere. Just keep moving." The carriage lurched forward, and Catherine found herself moving through London with the Duke of Thornfield while wearing a soaking wet evening gown and no chaperone. Her mother would faint. Edmund would use it as further proof of her unsuitability. She discovered she didn't care. "What happened tonight?" Alexander asked quietly. "The version you want to tell, not the one Edmund's no doubt spreading." Catherine looked at her hands, pale and wrinkled from the rain. "You already know what happened. Edmund ended our engagement, publicly, thoroughly, in front of everyone who matters in London society. I know what he did. I'm asking why. Because I'm unsuitable." She heard the bitterness in her own voice. "He said I've shown shocking lack of propriety and judgment. That he cannot in good conscience bind himself to me. That's what he said, not why he did it. Catherine looked up, meeting Alexander's eyes. They were gray, she noticed, the color of storm clouds, of steel, of things that were both beautiful and dangerous. She'd never looked closely enough to notice before. Miss Abigail Peterson, she said simply. Daughter of the Earl of Hampton. Her dowry is twice mine. Her father has connections to the Prince Regent. Her family is everything Edmund has been trying to social climb toward since university, and apparently she expressed interest in him last month. So he discarded you for better prospects. Yes, but he couldn't simply end our engagement. That would make him look fickle, mercenary. So instead, he manufactured reasons to cast me aside, made me the unsuitable one, protected his reputation while destroying mine. What reasons did he claim? Catherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. I danced with Lord Pemberton twice at Lady Ashford's ball. I was seen speaking privately with Mr. Reynolds in the library at my own engagement party. I expressed opinions about women's education that he found inappropriate. I read novels that he deemed scandalous. She met Alexander's eyes. In short, I committed the grave sins of being polite to other men, having conversations, possessing opinions, and reading books. Clearly I'm a fallen woman. Alexander's jaw tightened. He's an idiot. He's strategic. By the time he was done tonight, half of London believed I'd been carrying on inappropriate correspondence with multiple gentlemen, that I'd been indiscreet, that I'd embarrassed him repeatedly. None of it's true, but truth doesn't matter. What matters is that Edmund came out looking like the wronged party, and I came out looking like damaged goods. You're not damaged goods. Society will think I am. No one will want to court the woman Edmund Hartley found unsuitable. I'll be a cautionary tale, a warning. The girl who reached above her station and was found wanting. The carriage rolled through the streets, and Catherine watched the city pass through rain-streaked windows, people hurrying home in the twilight, shops closing for the evening, life continuing normally while hers fell apart. What will you do? Alexander asked. Catherine considered the question. What would she do? Her engagement was broken. Her reputation was in tatters. Her prospects were non-existent. She had a small independence from her father's estate, enough to live quietly if not comfortably. She had her mother's house at least until her brother decided what to do with it. I'll leave London, she said finally. Go to the country. My mother has a cottage in Kent. I'll live there. Read my scandalous novels. Express my inappropriate opinions to the sheep. Die a spinster and be remembered as a cautionary tale. She smiled, but it felt brittle. It's not the future I'd planned, but it's a future nonetheless. That's surrender. That's survival. No, Alexander said, leaning forward. Survival is fighting back, standing up, refusing to let Edmund Hartley and Abigail Peterson write your story for you. And how exactly do you suggest I do that? Challenge Edmund to a duel? Spread scandalous rumors about Miss Peterson? My reputation is already destroyed, Your Grace. There's no fighting back from this. There's only accepting it and moving on. There's another option. Something in his tone made Catherine's heart skip. What option? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and Catherine saw him wrestling with something. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Marry me. The carriage seemed to stop, though it kept rolling through the streets. Catherine stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I beg your pardon. Marry me, Alexander repeated, and now he was looking directly at her with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Be my Duchess. Let Edmund Hartley and all of London society see that he didn't break you. He elevated you. Catherine laughed, slightly hysterical. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're a duke. You could marry anyone. Why would you possibly want to marry a woman whose engagement just ended in public scandal? Because I've wanted to marry you since you were 20 years old and told Lord Hartley that his opinions on women's education were archaic nonsense. Alexander's voice was steady, but Catherine heard something underneath it, something that had been buried for years. Because Edmund Hartley is a fool who couldn't see what he had. Because you deserve better than being relegated to a cottage in Kent. And because watching you promise yourself to that idiot 3 months ago was the hardest thing I've ever done. Catherine couldn't breathe. You wanted to marry me? I still do. If you'll have me. If you can look past the fact that I'm proposing in the least romantic way possible, in a moving carriage while you're soaking wet, and I'm operating on pure fury at Edmund Hartley. He smiled, but it was strained. I realize this is sudden. I realize you probably think I'm insane. But I mean it, Catherine. Marry me. Be my Duchess. And let's show London society exactly what kind of mistake Edmund made tonight. And you, dear listener, What would you do in Catherine's place? Have you lived through something similar? Do you know someone who went through a situation like this? Tell your story in the comments. We read each one with affection and love knowing your experiences. And if this story is making you sigh, smile, or even shed a tear, share it with someone special. Think of that friend, sister, or daughter who would also love this journey. Send her the link. Love is meant to be shared, isn't it? But let's return, because what is about to happen will leave you speechless. Catherine's mind reeled. Alexander Thornton, the Duke of Thornfield, had just proposed to her, in a carriage, while she was dripping wet and ruined. And he'd said he'd wanted to marry her for years. It made no sense. None of it made sense. "You barely know me," she said faintly. "I've known you for 6 years. I've danced with you at least a dozen times. I've argued with you about philosophy, politics, and literature. I've watched you champion causes everyone else dismissed. I've seen you be kind to people society overlooks. I know you better than Edmund Hartley ever bothered to. This is madness. Probably. But it's also practical. You need to salvage your reputation. I need a duchess. We get along well. We share similar views on most important matters, and it would spectacularly undermine Edmund's narrative about your unsuitability. Is that what this is? Revenge on Edmund? No, Alexander said quietly. This is me finally being brave enough to ask for what I should have asked for 6 years ago. Edmund's humiliation is simply a pleasant side effect. Catherine's hands trembled. She clasped them together in her wet lap, trying to process what was happening. An hour ago, she'd been engaged to Edmund Hartley, planning a modest wedding, anticipating a comfortable if unexciting life. Now she was soaked, ruined, and being proposed to by a duke who claimed to have wanted her for years. "I don't love you," she said, and it felt important to be honest about that. "I know. But you didn't love Edmund either, did you?" She couldn't deny it. "No. I respected him. I thought we'd suit well enough. But love? No. Then we're starting from the same place, with the potential to build something real, rather than the illusion Edmund gave you. You said you've wanted to marry me for 6 years. That sounds rather more invested than starting from the same place." Alexander smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Catherine's breath catch. "I said I've wanted to marry you. I didn't say I'm in love with you. There's a difference. I admire you greatly. I think you're remarkable. I believe we could be happy together. But love? That's something we'd build, if we chose to, together." It was the most honest proposal Catherine had ever heard of. No false promises of eternal devotion, no flowery declarations, just practical assessment, honest admiration, and the offer of partnership. "People will say you're rescuing me," Catherine said, "that you took pity on me, that I trapped you somehow. People will say many things. They always do. But within a month, they'll be gossiping about the next scandal, and we'll simply be the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield. Your past with Edmund will be an amusing footnote, nothing more. My mother will think I've lost my mind. Your mother will be thrilled. Distressed daughter becomes a duchess? That's far better than she could have hoped for after tonight." Catherine looked at him, really looked at him. Alexander Thornton was handsome, certainly, wealthy, powerful, everything a woman could want in terms of worldly success. But more than that, he was offering her a choice, a way out that didn't involve hiding in Kent, a chance to rewrite her own story. "Why now?" she asked. "Why didn't you say something before? Before Edmund? Before any of this?" Alexander's expression became guarded. "Because I'm a coward. Because I convinced myself you were beyond my reach, that you'd never consider me. Because I let propriety and doubt stop me from acting. And then Edmund proposed, and you accepted, and I told myself I was too late, that I'd missed my chance and had to accept it. And now? Now Edmund's thrown you away, and I refuse to waste another moment on cowardice. So I'm asking, Catherine Winters, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because you have no other options, but because it's a choice you want to make. Will you be my duchess?" The carriage rolled through the darkening streets. Rain pattered against the roof. Catherine sat in her wet dress across from a duke who just offered her everything she'd lost and more. She should say no, should point out the dozen reasons this was insane, should maintain some dignity, some hesitation, some sense. "Yes," she heard herself say instead. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alexander's eyes widened, as if he hadn't quite expected her to agree. "Yes? Yes, though I have conditions." A smile tugged at his lips. "Name them." "First, we're honest with each other. Always. No pretending this is a love match when it's a practical arrangement. No false declarations or performance. Agreed. Second, I want to continue my work with the literacy charity. I won't be a duchess who simply hosts parties and looks ornamental. I'd be disappointed if you tried to be. I expect my duchess to be formidable. Your charity work is part of what makes you remarkable. Third, we build something real. I won't live in a cold marriage of convenience. If we're doing this, we do it properly. Partnership, friendship at minimum. And if love comes, we don't run from it. Alexander leaned forward, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the gold flecks in those gray eyes. I can agree to all of that, but I have a condition too. What condition? You stop thinking of yourself as damaged goods. Edmund was a fool. His opinion of you says everything about him and nothing about you. You're brilliant, passionate, kind, and strong, and I won't have my duchess believing otherwise. Something warm uncurled in Catherine's chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Hope. The sense that maybe, just maybe, this disaster of an evening had led to something better than what she'd lost. Deal, she said, and held out her hand. Alexander took it, his grip warm and steady. We should probably get you somewhere dry. And inform your mother before she hears about you riding around London unchaperoned with a duke. She's going to faint. Probably, but she'll recover when I ask your brother for permission to marry you. Robert's in Scotland. Then I'll send an express letter and wait a respectable 3 days before announcing our engagement. Long enough to observe minimal propriety, short enough to cut off Edmund's narrative before it fully spreads. Catherine blinked. You've thought this through. I've had 6 years to think about marrying you. I just needed the courage to act on it. Edmund's spectacular stupidity provided that courage. He rapped on the carriage roof. Take us to Lady Ashworth's residence, then send for Miss Winters's brother in Scotland. Express post. The carriage changed direction, and Catherine felt the reality of what she'd just agreed to settling over her. She was going to marry a duke. In 3 days, or perhaps a week at most, would become the Duchess of Thornfield. Would never have to think about Edmund Hartley again except to laugh at what he'd lost. People will think it's suspicious, she said, how quickly we're marrying after my broken engagement. Let them think whatever they like. We'll know the truth. That I've wanted to marry you for years, finally found the courage to ask, and you were generous enough to say yes despite my terrible timing. Your timing was actually perfect. An hour earlier, and I'd still have been engaged. An hour later, and I'd have been too broken to consider anything but hiding. Then perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all. The carriage pulled up outside her mother's townhouse, and Catherine realized she was about to walk in, dripping wet and accompanied by a duke, with news that would either give her mother heart palpitations or cause her to faint dead away. Possibly both. I should probably go in alone first, she said. Prepare her. I'm coming with you. If she's going to faint, better to have help nearby. You just want to see her reaction. I want to make sure she understands that this is serious. That I'm serious. That I'm not mocking you or offering charity, but genuinely asking to marry you. Catherine looked at him. This duke who'd appeared out of the rain like something from a novel. You really have wanted this for 6 years? Since the moment you told Lord Hartley his views on educating women were antiquated nonsense. You were wearing a green dress that brought out your eyes. Your hair was coming loose from its pins, and you were so passionately articulate that I forgot to breathe. I've wanted you ever since. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was convinced you deserved better than a duke who was terrified of rejection. Because Edmund seemed to make you happy, or at least content. Because I'm a coward who only found courage when you needed rescuing. He smiled, self-deprecating. Though I hope you'll let me prove I can be more than just a rescue. That I can be a partner. A friend. Eventually, perhaps more. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes, but for the first time tonight they weren't tears of humiliation or loss. I think I'd like that. Good. Now let's go inform your mother that her daughter's disaster of an evening has turned into a duchess. Her mother did faint. Twice. Once, when Catherine walked in soaking wet, and again when Alexander announced his intention to marry her. When Lady Ashworth finally stopped swooning long enough to speak coherently, she looked between them with an expression of complete bewilderment. You want to marry her? After tonight? After Edmund? Edmund Hartley is an idiot who couldn't recognize an extraordinary woman when he was engaged to one, Alexander said firmly. I, thankfully, am not that foolish. Miss Winters has agreed to be my duchess, and I consider myself the luckiest man in England. But the scandal will be eclipsed by our engagement announcement. By this time next week, London will be talking about how fortunate I am to have secured Miss Winters's hand, not about Edmund Hartley's loss. Lady Ashworth looked at her daughter. Catherine, is this what you want? Catherine thought about it, really thought about it. An hour ago, she'd been walking through the rain with no future, no prospects, nothing but humiliation and a cottage in Kent. Now she stood in her mother's drawing room, still soaking wet, but with a duke offering her partnership, respect, and the chance to build something real. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, Mother. It's what I want." The announcement of their engagement appeared in the Times 3 days later, causing a sensation that eclipsed even Edmund's dramatic rejection. Catherine Winters, the woman Edmund Hartley had declared unsuitable, was to marry the Duke of Thornfield. One of the most eligible men in England had chosen her within days of her broken engagement. The gossip was immediate and ferocious. "She must have been carrying on with the Duke all along," Lady Pemberton whispered at her afternoon tea. "Poor Mr. Hartley discovered it and had to end things." "Nonsense," Lady Hertford countered, having taken a liking to Catherine years before. "The Duke has been interested in Miss Winters for ages. Everyone could see it except the girl herself. Mr. Hartley's loss is entirely his own fault for being blind to what he had. But the timing is so suspicious," Miss Clarissa Morton insisted. "Engaged within 3 days? It's unseemly." "It's romantic," Lady Hertford said firmly. "A duke who saw his opportunity and took it. A woman who had the good sense to recognize a better offer when presented with one. I think it's marvelous." In the clubs, the men had their own theories. "Thornfield's rescuing her," Lord Pemberton said, swirling his brandy. "Noble of him, really. Taking on damaged goods to spite Hartley." "Don't be an idiot," the Marquis of Ashford snapped. "Thornfield's been half in love with Miss Winters for years. Anyone with eyes could see it. He attended her engagement party to Hartley and left within the hour looking like he wanted to murder someone. The man's finally grown a spine and done what he should have done years ago. Still, the timing is perfect. Hartley made himself look like a fool, and Thornfield swooped in and claimed the prize. That's not rescue. That's strategy." Edmund Hartley, hearing all of this, felt his world crumbling around him. He'd meant to cast Catherine aside quietly, to upgrade his prospects without consequence. Instead, he'd created the scandal of the season and lost his fiancée to a duke. Abigail Peterson, meanwhile, watched her own plans unraveling. Her father had been furious when he learned Edmund's true financial situation. The engagement she'd maneuvered so carefully toward was now impossible. And Catherine Winters, the woman she'd helped humiliate, was about to become a duchess. "We underestimated her," Abigail said bitterly to her mother. "We underestimated the Duke," her mother corrected. Who knew he'd been waiting for his chance? Catherine, insulated from most of the gossip by Alexander's protective presence and her mother's selective hearing, spent the 3 days before the wedding in a strange state of suspended reality. She was fitted for a wedding dress far more elegant than anything she'd owned before. She met with Alexander's solicitors to sign settlements that made her independently wealthy. She received calls from ladies who'd ignored her for years, suddenly eager to curry favor with the future Duchess of Thornfield. And she spent hours with Alexander, learning to know the man she'd agreed to marry. They walked in Hyde Park, properly chaperoned but given enough privacy to talk freely. They discussed everything from politics to poetry, from his childhood to hers, from their hopes to their fears. "I'm terrified I'll disappoint you," Catherine admitted on one of these walks, "that you've built me up in your mind as something more than I am." "Impossible," Alexander said. "I've watched you for 6 years, Catherine. I know exactly who you are. Passionate, intelligent, stubborn, kind. You have a terrible habit of interrupting people when you get excited about a topic. You read scandalous novels and aren't ashamed to admit it. You argue with earls about education and don't back down even when they bluster. You're precisely who I think you are, and that's exactly who I want. What if I can't be a proper duchess? Then you'll be an improper one, and we'll scandalize society together." He smiled. "Catherine, I don't want you to change. I want you to be yourself, the woman I've admired for years. If that means you're not a conventional duchess, then we'll redefine what a duchess should be." Catherine felt something in her chest ease. "You're rather good at this, you know." "At what?" "Making me feel valued, seen. Edmund never did that. He wanted me to fit his image of what a wife should be. You seem to want me to just be me. That's because you, as you are extraordinary. Why would I want you to be anyone else?" These conversations, more than anything, convinced Catherine that she'd made the right choice. Alexander didn't want to rescue her or save her or mold her into something else. He simply wanted her exactly as she was, with all her opinions and passions and flaws. It was more than she'd ever hoped for from marriage. We're almost reaching the end of this exciting journey. But if you loved the romance of Catherine and Alexander, I have wonderful news. We have dozens of other stories waiting for you here on the channel. Breathtaking historical romances, heartwarming second chances, unlikely loves that seem impossible until they happen. Each story more exciting than the last. After finishing this one, scroll down and check out our playlists. I'm sure you'll find your next favorite story. And don't forget, activate the notification bell. That way you receive an alert whenever we publish a new story. Because let's be honest, you already know you'll want the next one, right? Now yes, let's get to the moment you were waiting for, the ending your heart asked for. The wedding took place 1 week after that rainy evening, fast enough to prevent scandal from solidifying, long enough to observe minimal propriety. Catherine's brother arrived from Scotland, initially furious about the broken engagement with Edmund, then thoroughly confused by the rapid engagement to a duke. "You're certain about this?" Robert asked Catherine the night before the wedding. "A week ago you were engaged to Hartley. Now you're marrying the Duke of Thornfield. That's quite a change." "Edmund showed me who he really was," Catherine said simply. "Alexander is showing me who he could be. I'll take possibility over proven disappointment any day." "You don't love him." "Not yet, but I could. And that's more than I had with Edmund, who I'm quite certain I would have grown to resent within a year." Robert studied his sister's face. "You look happy. Actually happy, not just content." "I am happy. Terrified, certainly. This is happening so fast, but happy." She smiled. "Alexander treats me like I have a brain. He values my opinions. He wants me to continue my charity work. He's not trying to mold me into some perfect Duchess figure. He just wants me to be myself. Then I suppose I approve, though I reserve the right to thrash him if he makes you cry." "I appreciate that." The wedding itself was smaller than her engagement to Edmund would have been, but far more elegant. Alexander insisted on the best of everything, while Catherine insisted on simplicity. They compromised with tasteful excellence, and the result was a ceremony that felt both grand and intimate. Catherine wore cream silk instead of white, Alexander's choice. "White is for virgins and ingenues," he'd said. "You're neither. You're a woman of experience and intelligence. Wear something that reflects that." As she walked down the aisle toward where he waited, Catherine saw Edmund and Abigail Peterson in the crowd. Edmund looked stunned. Abigail looked furious. Catherine smiled at them both with genuine pleasure. "You're enjoying this," Alexander murmured when she reached him. "Immensely," she murmured back. "Is that wrong?" "Not even slightly. I'm rather enjoying it myself." The ceremony was traditional, the vows spoken clearly. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Alexander kissed her for the first time as her husband, Catherine felt something shift. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it, the foundation of something that could become real. At the wedding breakfast, Edmund cornered her while Alexander was speaking with the bishop. "You planned this," Edmund hissed. "You had the Duke waiting in reserve. You made me look like a fool." "No," Catherine said calmly. "You made yourself look like a fool by publicly ending our engagement, because you found better financial prospects. Alexander simply offered me a choice when you'd left me with none. That's not my cunning. That's your stupidity. You'll regret this. He only married you out of pity." "Actually," Alexander said, appearing at Catherine's elbow, "I married her because she's brilliant and I've wanted her for years. But do continue explaining to my wife why she should regret marrying me. I'm fascinated." Edmund paled. "Your Grace, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And now you'll have to live with knowing exactly what you lost. Miss Peterson is lovely, I'm sure, but she's not Catherine. No one is. Now if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my Duchess." He swept Catherine onto the floor for their first waltz as a married couple, and she found herself laughing, actually laughing, with genuine joy. "That was magnificently petty," she said. "I thought so, though in fairness, it was also true. You are brilliant. I have wanted you for years. And Edmund is an idiot." All factually accurate statements. I try to deal only in facts. They danced, and Catherine marveled at how right it felt, how Alexander's hand on her waist was steady and sure, how he looked at her like she was the only woman in the room, even though she knew she wasn't, how this marriage, born of scandal and rain and desperation, felt more real than anything she'd had with Edmund. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked. "That I'm glad I walked in the rain that night." "So am I, though I wish you hadn't needed to. I wish I'd been brave enough to speak before Edmund had the chance. Then I wouldn't have known what I was avoiding. I'd have always wondered if I'd made the right choice. This way I know exactly what I have, and what I left behind. And what do you have? Catherine looked up at him. This Duke who'd appeared in the rain and offered her a future, possibility, partnership, a chance to build something real. That's rather a lot, actually. It's everything, Alexander agreed. Their wedding night was spent at Thornfield House, Alexander's London residence. Catherine stood in the Duchess's chambers, which had been closed since his mother's death 15 years before, and felt the weight of her new position settling on her shoulders. You can change anything, Alexander said from the doorway. Redecorate completely. These were my mother's rooms, but they should be yours now. Catherine turned to face her new husband. He looked uncertain, which was oddly endearing on a man usually so assured. Are you nervous? She asked. Terrified. You? Same. We're married and we barely know each other. Then let's fix that. Alexander sat in one of the chairs by the fire. Tell me something I don't know about you. Catherine sat across from him, still in her wedding dress. I hate embroidery. Everyone assumes I enjoy it because I'm a woman, but I find it tedious. I can't carry a tune to save my life. Everyone assumes dukes must be accomplished in music, but I'm tone deaf. I've read every one of Mrs. Radcliffe's novels, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I once got into a fist fight at Cambridge over a disagreement about Wordsworth. Catherine laughed. Really? The other fellow said Wordsworth was sentimental drivel. I objected, strongly. Who won? I did, but we both got sent down for a week. He smiled. Worth it, though. Can't let people insult the poets. Defending Wordsworth with your fists. How very romantic. I'm a passionate man when it comes to literature, among other things. The way he said it, with that slight change in tone, made Catherine's breath catch. They were alone, married, sitting in chambers that would be theirs together. The reality of what came next hung between them. Alexander, she began, we don't have to do anything tonight, he said quickly. If you're not ready, if this is all too fast, we can simply talk, or sleep, or I can go to my own chambers. There's no rush. Catherine looked at this man who'd rescued her from the rain, who'd proposed marriage in a carriage, who'd defended her to Edmund and society, who was now offering her the choice to wait if she needed it. I don't want to wait, she said softly. We've already waited 6 years in a way. You waiting to speak, me not knowing you wanted to. I don't want to waste more time. Alexander's eyes darkened. Are you certain? I'm certain, though I should warn you. Edmund and I never... That is, I'm not entirely sure what. We'll figure it out together, Alexander said, standing and offering his hand. No expectations, no performance, just us, learning each other. Is that all right? Catherine took his hand and let him draw her to her feet. That's more than all right. What followed was tender and awkward and perfect. They fumbled with buttons and laces, laughed at their own clumsiness, discovered each other with gentle exploration, and when they finally came together, when Catherine gasped his name and Alexander whispered hers like a prayer, it felt like the natural conclusion to a conversation they'd been having since that night in the rain. Not love, not yet, but intimacy, trust, the building blocks of something that could become love, given time. And they had time, all the time in the world. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the drawing room of Thornfield House, reading a letter from her mother, and laughed until tears streamed down her face. What's so amusing? Alexander asked, looking up from his correspondence. Edmund and Abigail's engagement has ended. Apparently, her father discovered that Edmund's finances weren't nearly as healthy as he'd represented. He's deeply in debt and was counting on her dowry to save him. Her father refused the match. Karma is a remarkably efficient force. He's being cut by half of London society. The same people who pitied him when our engagement ended are now viewing him as a fortune hunter. As they should. The man's a scoundrel. Alexander set aside his papers and crossed to where Catherine stood. Though I must thank him. His idiocy brought me you. You would have gotten me eventually. You said you'd wanted to ask for 6 years. I said I'd wanted to. I might never have found the courage if Edmund hadn't forced the issue. He pulled her close. How are you feeling? Any better? Catherine smiled, one hand moving to her still flat stomach. Still queasy in the mornings, but happy. Terrified, but happy. We'll be wonderful parents. You're very confident. I'm confident in you, in us, in what we've built. He kissed her forehead. I love you, you know. I've been waiting for the right moment to say it, but there's no perfect moment. Just truth. I love you, Catherine. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I think I have for a while now, but I wasn't sure. I wanted to be certain, but I am. I love you. Not just possibility anymore. No, reality. We built something real, just like we promised. They stood together in the drawing room, the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield, holding each other close. Outside, London continued its endless dance of scandal and society. But here, in this moment, they had everything that mattered. Partnership, friendship, love. And it had all started with a walk in the rain. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Catherine would smile and tell them about the worst night of her life, about a broken engagement, public humiliation, and a walk through rain-soaked streets with no destination in mind. And Alexander would add that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. That courage often comes when you're certain you have nothing left to lose. That love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings, if you're brave enough to give it a chance. Their eldest daughter, hearing this story, would shake her head. But father, weren't you terrified, proposing to mother in a carriage while she was soaking wet? Absolutely terrified, Alexander would admit. But I'd spent 6 years being too afraid to speak. The thought of watching her walk away forever was more terrifying than rejection. And you said yes right away, mother? I did, Catherine would confirm, because your father offered me something Edmund never had. A choice, partnership, the chance to build something real. How could I refuse that? But you didn't love him yet. No, but I loved the man he was trying to be, the man he wanted to become, and I wanted to see if we could build something extraordinary together. We did. And really, Catherine would think, that said everything that needed to be said. Love wasn't always instantaneous. Sometimes it was built, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, day by day. Sometimes it started with rain and disaster, and ended with joy. Sometimes the worst nights led to the best lives. Their son would always ask about the rain, fascinated by the drama of it. It was really pouring that night? He'd ask, eyes wide. Absolutely torrential, Alexander would confirm. Your mother looked like a drowned cat. I did not look like a drowned cat, Catherine would protest, laughing. I looked dignified. Sodden, but dignified. You looked beautiful, Alexander would correct, pulling her close. Even soaking wet and heartbroken, you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Still are. Flatterer. Truth-teller. There's a difference. And their children would roll their eyes at their parents' obvious affection, but secretly they'd treasure these stories, these glimpses into how their family began, how disaster and courage and a duke's royal carriage transformed a ruined woman into a beloved duchess. How love, real love, was built not on perfect moments, but on honest ones, not on grand gestures, but on steady presence, not on rescuing, but on partnership. How sometimes the universe conspired to bring the right people together at exactly the right moment, even if that moment looked like the worst one possible. And so ends the story of Catherine and Alexander, a journey about courage found in disaster, about love built on honest foundation rather than romantic illusion, about recognizing that sometimes the worst moments of our lives create space for the best things to grow. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it touched mine bringing it to you. If it moved you, if you sighed, if you smiled along with our characters, leave your like. It motivates us to continue. And tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment? What touched you most? We want to know. Each comment is read with affection. Are you missing it already? Don't worry. We have a new story coming very soon. Subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss it. And while you wait, explore our channel. We have so many other beautiful stories waiting for you. Thank you so much for your company, for choosing to spend this time with us, for opening your heart to one more love story. Until the next journey, dear listener, may your heart always be open to love, to hope, and to the good moments life reserves for us. A warm hug, and see you soon. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. Por favor, verifique as respostas. Sone 4. 5. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. P.